Do you believe that those who have passed can still be by our side? My name is David Harrison. I'm 42 years old, a high school history teacher in a small town called Millbrook, nestled in the hills of Vermont. I live alone in a modest two-story house that belonged to my grandparents on a tree-lined street where neighbors still wave from their porches and know each other's dogs by name. What I'm about to share with you completely changed everything I believed about life, death, and what lies beyond. I was always the skeptic in the family. Growing up, I'd listen to my grandmother, Eleanor, we called her Nana Ellie, tell stories about dreams that carried messages, impossible signs from beyond, and gentle presences that defied explanation. I loved her too much to argue, but deep down, I thought it was all wishful thinking from someone who felt too deeply and questioned too little, until she passed away. And 4 months later, on a cold Tuesday evening, something completely impossible happened in my own home. This story will forever change how you see what's real and what perhaps never really left our side, waiting only for us to stop doubting and start feeling. It wasn't a hallucination. It wasn't the wandering of a grieving mind. It was a real presence, alive, vibrant, an unmistakable scent. A sound I'd known since childhood. A voice that called me by the nickname only she used, with that tenderness only a grandmother could possess. And what she told me there, in that kitchen that seemed more real than any place I'd ever been while awake, forever transformed how I understand longing, love, and what truly awaits us at the end of this journey. My name is David, but she called me Danny Boy. Nana Ellie's voice was the only one that could make that nickname sound beautiful, filled with a love that warmed the soul. Today, when someone tries to use it, I smile politely, but it doesn't sound the same, because no one in the entire world spoke like my grandmother. I practically grew up attached to her. My parents, Linda and Robert, worked from dawn to dusk at their small hardware store that my father inherited from his uncle. It was Nana Ellie who picked me up from school every afternoon with that smile that made my entire day make sense. Our routine was sacred. We'd arrive home and she'd prepare an elaborate snack, always warm apple cinnamon bread with butter melting on top, accompanied by hot chocolate in the ceramic mug painted with bluebirds. While I ate, she'd play old records on the vintage turntable, Ella Fitzgerald, Frank Sinatra, Billie Holiday, music that stuck to your soul. While the pot roast simmered in the old cast-iron pot, which she insisted on using despite having a modern electric stove, she'd sit in her wicker rocking chair and knit. She'd embroider pillowcases, mend clothes, and tell stories from when she was a girl on her family's farm. She spoke of a time when everything was fields and forests, when people visited without hurry, and how the world was moving too fast for hearts to keep up. Nana Ellie believed in everything science couldn't explain. She prayed to her guardian angel every night before bed, talked to the herbs in her garden as if they were people, lit candles for family members who had passed on. She said, "We shouldn't fear the invisible, because that's precisely where the things that truly matter in life reside." I listened to all of this with a child's attention, absorbing every word as if it were law. But as I grew up, became a teenager and then an adult, I became increasingly practical. I studied, earned my degree in history, became a teacher. I specialized in American Civil War history, fell in love with the logic of great historians, and became skeptical by nature and training. I believed everything in life had a scientific explanation. That grief was just a chemical process in the brain, trying to process absence. That dreams were merely unconscious noise, remnants of the day reorganizing during sleep. That coincidences were just statistics, and that the supernatural was an invention of those who couldn't accept the harshness of reality. But deep in my heart, I think I said these things more to avoid feeling than because I truly believed them. My relationship with Nana Ellie was unique in the world. More than a grandmother, she was my best friend, my second mother, my personal oracle. When I was confused about some life situation, she never told me what to do. She simply told a story, always a story that seemed to have nothing to do with my problem. And somehow, mysteriously, the answer I needed was there, hidden between old words and the wisdom of someone who had lived much. I never married. I had some serious relationships, loves that lasted months or even years, but none put down deep roots. I think deep down, my heart always belonged to a time that only she understood. A time without hurry, without noise, with the smell of cornbread baking and the sound of old jazz records playing. At 42, I live alone in the same house where I grew up. It's a simple house with 3 bedrooms, a front porch and a backyard. It's still full of her. The burgundy armchair where she sat to watch the evening news is still there, in the same corner of the living room. The floral apron still hangs on the kitchen hook. The grandfather clock, which she said she received as a wedding gift from my grandfather William, still marks the hours with that loud tick-tock I can hear from my bed. My routine is simple. I wake at 6 a.m., drink black coffee, teach from 7:30 to 3:30 at Millbrook High, come home and write. For years, I've been trying to finish a book about Vermont's role in the Underground Railroad, but something's always missing, as if inspiration were right there on the tip of my tongue, but always hidden, always just out of reach. My students like me. They say I'm different from other teachers, that my classes are peaceful, and that I teach in a way that touches the heart. Maybe because I learned from Nana Ellie that you teach more with silence and example than with words and theory. Maybe because, without realizing it, I carried a piece of her with me every time I entered a classroom. For all those years, I consciously avoided thinking about the day she would leave. I knew the moment would come of course. Nana Ellie was 91, and although she seemed eternal in my grandson's mind, I wasn't naive. But she seemed so strong, so present, so permanent. Even with her more fragile body, her gaze remained steady, full of a sweetness that could shelter any storm that arose in my heart. In her final months, she began saying strange things. Not strange from mental confusion, her mind was as sharp as ever, but strange from premonition. She'd say things like, "When I'm no longer here, the way you know me, don't worry, Danny boy, you'll feel me." Or, "We never really disappear, we just change addresses." I pretended not to hear properly. I'd change the subject, make a joke, offer some tea, anything to avoid facing what she was trying to prepare me for. The last time I saw her was on a Thursday, September 23rd. It was an ordinary day, one of those you don't imagine you'll keep in memory forever. I arrived at her house around 2 p.m., as I did twice a week. She was in the kitchen, preparing tea and arranging homemade oatmeal cookies on a flowered china plate. We sat at the small kitchen table and talked for almost 3 hours. She was more talkative than usual, remembering childhood stories I'd never heard. She told me about a sister who died when she was only 14, about a fear of thunderstorms that she carried for decades, and about a recurring dream she'd had since she was a girl. "Do you know what the dream was, Danny boy?" she asked, stirring honey into her tea with that little silver spoon that was a family heirloom. "I dreamed I was on a wooden bridge, right in the middle, watching the water flow underneath, and there was always someone on the other side waving at me, calling, but I could never see who it was." "What did you do in the dream?" I asked, genuinely curious. "I stood still, afraid to cross, until one day, about 15 years ago, I had the same dream, but this time I could see who was on the other side." She paused, sipped her tea, and smiled in that mysterious way. "It was you, Danny boy, about 8 years old, waving at me and shouting, 'Come on, Nana, come on, I'm waiting.'" "And then," I insisted, "then I crossed the bridge. For the first time in my life, I crossed. And when I reached the other side, you disappeared. But I wasn't sad, because I understood that the dream wasn't about fear. It was about having the courage to move forward when someone you love is waiting. At the time, I thought it was beautiful, but I didn't understand the message. I would only understand months later. That day, when I said goodbye, she hugged me longer than usual, a tight hug that smelled of lavender and vanilla. "I love you, my boy," she whispered in my ear. "Never forget that." At 11:47 p.m. the following night, my mother called. Her voice trembled, but she tried to be strong, as she always was in difficult times. "Grandma passed peacefully, son. She went in her sleep." She didn't. "Safa." I was silent for seconds that felt like hours. The feeling wasn't shock, it was collapse, as if someone had pulled a thread and my entire emotional structure had unraveled at once. I got in the car and drove there as if in a trance. With each mile, my mind repeated like a broken record. This can't be. She was fine yesterday. We had tea together. She told me stories. This can't be happening. I arrived at the house and it was full of people I barely knew. Distant relatives, neighbors, people who appeared at times like these. But the house was empty of her, completely empty. The burgundy armchair was there, with the cushion still dented in the shape of her body. The radio was turned off and silent. The tea kettle was on the stove, still with a bit of chamomile tea she drank before bed. But Nana Ellie wasn't there. My body followed the automatic social protocol. I greeted relatives I hadn't seen in years, received condolence hugs, heard ready-made phrases about being in a better place and not suffering anymore. But inside, there was only a deafening silence, as if someone had turned off the sound of the world. The wake was the next day, on a rainy autumn morning. Many people came. Nana Ellie was beloved throughout the neighborhood. During the 8 hours we were there, I heard dozens of stories about kindnesses she'd done, people she'd helped, advice she'd given. It was as if each person carried a little piece of her, a special memory that only the two of them shared. But I couldn't cry. I stood next to the casket, looking at her photo, smiling. A picture taken on my 35th birthday, where she appeared with a flower in her hair and that smile of someone who knew a good secret. So many people around, so much noise, so many tears, and I could only hear the sound of my own chest, hollow and echoing empty. At the cemetery, I carried the casket with my cousins. It was heavier than I expected, but at the same time seemed too light to carry an entire life of love. When they lowered her into the earth, it was as if they lowered a part of me with her. I returned home like someone returning from a nightmare they can't forget. I looked at the walls, the furniture, her things scattered everywhere. Everything was the same, but it seemed like another world, a world where Nana Ellie existed only in photographs and memories. I tried to go on with life, return to work, pretend everything was fine. But the truth was that something fundamental inside me had broken. Her absence was a constant, physical, painful presence. My chest felt heavy, my breathing failed for no reason, and I began to smell things that weren't there. Apple cinnamon bread, Nivea cream, lavender. And then, in the middle of this emptiness that seemed endless, the dreams began. But what happened next was even more impossible. There were 4 weeks of strange dreams. First, just vague shadows, familiar. Silhouettes I saw from afar but could never reach. Then, scents. That lavender perfume mixed with flower and affection that was uniquely hers. Next, sounds. The tick-tock of the grandfather clock, the crackling of logs in the fireplace, the sound of the little spoon stirring honey in tea. But on the night of Tuesday, October 28th at 11:47 p.m., exactly the time my mother said she had made her transition, everything changed completely. I was on the living room couch with a book in my lap, and that crocheted blanket she had made years ago. The day had been ordinary, one of those with nothing special, morning classes, lunch alone, a walk through downtown. But something about that night seemed different, quieter, as if the air were denser, more charged with possibilities. I fell asleep right there, still dressed, with the book sliding off my chest. And then it happened. And then something that defies all logic occurred. It wasn't an ordinary dream. It was something completely different from anything I had ever experienced while sleeping. It was too real, too intense, too vivid. I could feel the smell of the wooden floor, the warmth of golden light coming through the window, the distant sound of a cardinal singing in the backyard. There was even the sensation of a gentle breeze moving the curtains. I was standing in the kitchen of my childhood home, not the kitchen as it was now, but as it had been 25 years ago. The small formica table was set with 2 cups. The old wood-burning stove was lit, with a kettle releasing that thin, fragrant steam I knew so well. The smell was unmistakable. Lavender, apple cinnamon bread, vanilla, and a touch of freshly brewed coffee. The light was different. It wasn't electric light or sunlight. It was a golden light, soft, that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Objects had a subtle glow, as if each thing had been polished with longing and affection. And there, at the sink, with her. Back to me was she, Nana Ellie, whole, present, alive, but not as in her final years, with her body bent by age and hair completely white. She was as in my childhood, more upright, with hair still brown pulled back in a neat bun, broad shoulders, strong hands. She wore that floral apron I remembered perfectly, blue with small yellow flowers, tied at the waist with a careful bow. She turned slowly, as if she knew I was there, as if she had been waiting. Her face was exactly as I kept it, in my heart's memory, gentle wrinkles around her eyes, the smile that lit up the entire room, that gaze full of sweetness that could heal any pain. "You took your time, Danny boy," she said, and the voice, my God, that voice. It wasn't memory. It wasn't an echo. It was pure, real, tangible presence. My knees gave out. I wanted to run to her, hug her, kiss her face, but my body seemed to float in a strange state between earth and sky. I trembled from head to toe, but at the same time felt an inexplicable calm taking over me, a warmth that came from within, as if all the pain of recent months had been suspended for that moment. "Nana?" My voice came out weak, choked, almost a whisper. Is this a dream?" She laughed softly, exactly as she did when I said something silly as a child. "For you, it might be a dream, but I'm here, just not the way you remember. Now it's different, but no less real. But you passed away. I thought I'd never be able to." She interrupted with a gentle gesture, bringing her finger to her lips, as she always did when she wanted me to stop talking and start listening. "Don't say never, Danny boy. Love has passages, not endings. When you truly feel I can come. You just needed to quiet all that sadness so you could hear me." I approached slowly. I was less than 3 feet from her now, and I could see everything in minute detail. The gentle wrinkles, the simple wedding ring on her finger, the sparkle in her eyes that mixed joy with a wisdom I had never noticed before. She was, lighter, as if she were made of light and memory at the same time, but without losing any of the essence that made her who she was. "I tried to call you before," she continued, approaching the table and pulling out a chair, "but you were too full of sadness. And sadness, my boy, it makes too much noise inside us. And where there's too much noise, it's hard to enter." Tears ran down, my face non-stop. I tried to speak, but my throat tightened every time I opened my mouth. "I miss you so much," I finally managed to whisper. "I know, Danny boy, I miss you too. But it's not absence you feel, it's longing. And longing is a bridge, not a hole." She came closer, extended her hand toward mine. She didn't actually touch, it wasn't that kind of touch, but she placed her hand very close to mine, and there, I felt something indescribable. It wasn't the warmth of skin, it was the warmth of the soul. A warmth that entered through the pores and went straight to the heart, healing wounds I didn't even know existed. "Why did you come now?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Because now you can listen. And because there are things you need to remember before moving forward." She turned and took something from the shelf. It was an old notebook, one of those with a hard blue cover that were used in the old days. I recognized it immediately. It was where she wrote down recipes, thoughts, and sometimes little poems she invented. Here, there's more than food, Danny boy. There's everything I never told you out loud, but that you always knew in your heart. You were born with the gift of words. Use them to heal, not to hide. I can't write anymore, Nana. Since you left, everything became colorless, meaningless. She looked deep into my eyes, with that intensity only she knew how to have. I didn't leave, boy. I just changed. Blaines, you're the one who closed your eyes to what was always there. The kitchen began to change around us. The walls became transparent, as if made of glass. Around us, I could see a garden that had never existed in that house. Flowers in colors I had never seen. Trees that seemed made of light. A sky that had all the colors of sunset at the same time. A silence so pure it seemed like celestial music. Where are we? I asked, amazed. In a place between you and me. A space that opens. When the heart truly listens, here we can talk without the barriers of time. But time is short, Danny boy. So listen with your chest, not with your head. She sat in her usual chair and motioned for me to sit too. It was exactly like hundreds of afternoons from my childhood, but infinitely more special. You need to know something. Nothing is lost. Not a hug, not a conversation, not a laugh, not a tear. Everything is recorded in a part of the universe that never ends. And when longing is clean, not that heavy sadness you were carrying, it becomes a bridge to that place. She began to tell me things she had never said. She spoke about the sister who died when she was a child, about how it took years to understand that the girl had never really gone away. She told me about a deep fear she carried for decades, thinking she wasn't a good mother to her children. She revealed that she always knew I would be special from the day she first held me. You know, that bridge. Dream I told you about, she asked. I understand everything now. The bridge was the passage between worlds. And you, little one, were showing me that I didn't need to be afraid to cross. Because on the other side, love continues. You knew you were going to leave. I didn't know when, but I knew I would. And I knew you would suffer. That's why I spent the last months trying to teach you that we only lose what we never truly loved. Will you come back again? I asked, already, feeling that moment was coming to an end. She smiled, but this time there was melancholy mixed with joy. That depends on you, my love. If your heart stays open, if you don't let sadness make too much noise, I'll come. But don't always expect it the same way. Sometimes it's a scent, a song that plays at just the right time, a small dream, and sometimes it's just silence. And even then, even in silence, it's me. The light around us began to change, becoming softer. A gentle wind passed through the kitchen, moving her hair. The flowers in the garden around us began to close, like in a magical twilight. It's time, isn't it? I asked, already knowing the answer. She nodded slowly. It is, my boy, but now you know. Now you remember. And that's what matters. She stood up and came to me. She touched my face with that hand that radiated pure love. Go live, Danny boy. Go teach those kids at school. Go write. Write about us, about love, about how longing can be beautiful. And when you feel you need me, simply close your eyes and call me. I'll be there. At that moment, I knew that everything I believed was wrong. She walked to the kitchen door, as she had done thousands of times when I was a child. She stopped at the threshold, looked back one last time. And please, fix that grandfather clock in the living room, but leave it showing 11:47. Just change its heart. The light enveloped her like an embrace. And then, slowly, like a melody, fading in the air, she was gone. I woke up on the couch at exactly 11:47 p.m. The blanket was on the floor. The kitchen light was on, something I was absolutely certain I hadn't done. And the radio was playing by itself. An old jazz standard, The Way You Look Tonight by Frank Sinatra, her favorite song. My chest was light for the first time in months. My face was wet, but not with sadness. It was longing, but good longing, the kind that builds bridges. The signs began in a way that gave me chills. From that extraordinary night onward, everything in my life began to change. Not magically or instantly like in movies, but like a morning that gradually brightens until suddenly you realize the entire sun is streaming through your soul's window. In the first days after the dream, I began to notice small things I had completely ignored before. The old kitchen radio, for example, which had been silent for over 3 years. It started making small, dry clicks, almost like electronic breathing trying to come back to life, and always, invariably, at 11:47 p.m., every day, at the exact minute. I took the radio to 4 different technicians. They all said the same thing: nothing's wrong with it. The parts are perfect. But when I plugged it in at home, only silence, except for the daily clicks, punctual as a Swiss watch. At school, something strange began to happen. My students commented that my voice was different. "Teacher, you seem calmer," said Emma, a sophomore who always paid attention to everything. "It's like your eyes are shining brighter." I'd laugh, change the subject, but inside I knew exactly what she was perceiving. There was something new in me, something that came directly from Nana Ellie. I started writing again, at first just scattered sentences scribbled on napkins during class breaks. Memories, scents, words she used to say. Then the texts began to flow naturally, as if a dam had burst inside. And me, I wrote an article about time and longing that I published on the school's blog. Within a week, it had gone viral on the town's social media. People commented, "It seems like it was written especially for me." And I smiled, because I knew who was guiding my hand. The signs became more frequent and impossible to ignore. On a Thursday, I opened an old book of hers, To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee, and found a dried 4-leaf clover pressed between the pages, along with a handwritten note. "If you ever feel like you have no ground beneath you, open this book and remember, I planted clovers for the patron saint of writers." I laughed and cried at the same time. It was impossible for that clover to be there. I had leafed through this book dozens of times after her passing. One morning I was grocery shopping when an unknown elderly woman stopped me in the cereal aisle. She was about 75 with gray hair and a sweet smile. "Excuse me for bothering you, young man," she said, "but you smell like apple cinnamon bread. It reminded me so much of my mother." I smiled and thanked her, but it sent chills down my spine. Nana Ellie made the best apple cinnamon bread in the region, and I hadn't eaten any in months. I began writing everything down in a small notebook I carried in my pocket, not to prove anything to anyone. I knew that those who hadn't lived it wouldn't believe, but to not forget any detail. Because I felt that when we forget the signs, they drift away. My mornings changed completely. I began waking up earlier, not from obligation, but from desire. I said silent prayers, not prayers asking for things, just conversations, as if she were there, sitting in the kitchen chair, having coffee with me. Sometimes I even set an extra cup on the table, just from longing, just to keep the bridge open. I discovered a social project I didn't know about. The municipal nursing home needed volunteers to read to the elderly. I signed up that same week. Every Wednesday at 3 p.m., I arrived there with a book and read poems, stories, chronicles. Some cried, others laughed. Many simply closed their eyes and listened, as if the words were music. One day, an 87-year-old man named Mr. Peterson held my hand at the end of the reading and said, with teary eyes, "She's proud of you, teacher." I didn't ask who she was. I didn't need to. I knew. My beliefs changed profoundly, but naturally. I didn't become a religious fanatic or start attending seances and spiritual centers, but I learned to respect the invisible, to understand that there's much more between heaven and earth than our limited reason can admit. I began to believe, not from blind faith, but from personal experience. I also changed how I listened to people. I stopped trying to correct when someone told me an inexplicable experience. I stopped giving scientific explanations for coincidences that clearly weren't coincidences. I just listened, because I learned from Nana Ellie that listening with your chest is infinitely more important than understanding with your head. Even my plants began to flourish again. The lavender she had planted 5 years ago in the backyard bed, which had been dry since her passing, bloomed beautifully after months of being withered. And every time the wind hit the flowers, the scent came strong through the kitchen window. That same unmistakable scent that transported me directly to her arms. I went back to fix the grandfather clock in the living room, but followed exactly what she had asked. I left it showing 11:47. I replaced the internal mechanism, the heart, as she said, but kept the hands stopped at that sacred time. It works perfectly, but stays eternally stopped. It's as if that minute were a portal between worlds, a constant reminder, a window always open. I reconnected with friends I had distanced myself from after her passing. I reconnected with my cousin, Michael, who lived in Boston and whom I hadn't spoken to in 3 years. I asked forgiveness from people I had hurt without realizing. I heard requests for forgiveness too, and I discovered that everything in life resolves when we stop feeding the pain and start listening to what it wants to teach. I became another man, but without changing who I was fundamentally. I just returned to being who I was when I was with her. Lighter, more present, more connected to what really matters. I began writing letters to strangers, to grieving families whose stories reached me by chance, or not. I started leaving anonymous notes on park benches, on buses, in library books. Those you love haven't gone away. Close your eyes, listen. I discovered later that some people kept these notes as precious treasures. I created a personal blog without revealing my real name. I called it Invisible Bridges. I publish real stories of people who lived experiences like mine. Dreams, signs, visits, impossible coincidences. Today, the blog has over 75,000 monthly readers, and the most incredible thing, hundreds write back, telling their own experiences. It's as if I had opened a door, and other people found courage to open theirs. The longing didn't disappear. It would be a lie to say it did. Sometimes, especially on special dates or when I hear a song she liked, the physical absence of her still hurts. But now, it's a different pain. It's a pain that teaches, that transforms, that connects. It's a pain that builds bridges instead of digging holes. And today, with all the certainty that fits in my heart, I can affirm she is here. Not the same way she was before, of course, but she is. Present, active, participating in my life in a way that goes far beyond ordinary longing. She comes in scents that appear from nowhere, in songs that play at exactly the right time, in casual encounters that teach me something important, in small but meaningful dreams, and especially at that sacred time, 11:47 p.m., when the entire world seems to stop for a minute to remember that love knows no boundaries. And today, I am absolutely certain that if you've made it this far, it's because you feel this too. If you're reading this story, it's because somehow it touched something deep in your heart. Maybe you've also lost someone very special. Maybe you've been looking for signs for months or years. Maybe you felt that inexplicable chill in the middle of the night and didn't know how to interpret it. Or perhaps you simply feel that longing that doesn't pass, that can't be explained, that can't be consoled with ordinary words. I understand perfectly, because I was exactly there. In that dark place where absence hurts more than any physical pain, where silence is deafening, where every object in the house echoes memories that make the heart bleed. And I can tell you, looking into your eyes through this screen, with all the certainty I carry in my chest, those we truly love in a pure and deep way never completely go away. Never. The experience with Nana Ellie taught me something that no philosophy book, no religion, no scientific theory had managed to teach me before. That love is stronger than time, stronger than distance, stronger than death itself. That there truly is an invisible thread connecting hearts, even when one no longer beats here on this plane. What changed in me wasn't just belief in the supernatural, it was the entire way of living. I began to listen more, feel more, hug more, forgive more. I understood that there's a profound beauty in longing when it transforms into living memory, into loving gesture, into words that heal, into care that extends to others. I learned that dreams aren't just random remnants of our day. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes, they are visits, they are encounters, they are messages sent by those who love us and found a way to bend the laws of physics to whisper in our ear that everything is okay. Nana Ellie's presence showed me that it's not about getting over the loss. That word, getting over, always sounded wrong to me, violent, as if love were an obstacle to be overcome. It's not. It's about transforming pain into good longing, about transforming absence into subtle presence, about transforming silence into message, about transforming tears into bridges. Today, I write every day, not from professional obligation, but as a way to keep this communication open. Each text, each letter, each anonymous note is a way to keep the light on, so she continues finding the path to me, and so other people find courage to light their own lights. I know she comes. I feel it in details that only those who love recognize, in the lavender scent that appears without explanation, in the radio that clicked exactly when I was doubting, in the right song at the right time, in impossible encounters that always teach something, and especially in that sacred moment every day, 11:47 p.m., when I stop everything I'm doing and simply remember that love continues. Life goes on, of course, with challenges, sadnesses, uncertainties, but also with unexpected joys, wonderful discoveries, and a growing feeling that we're not alone on this journey. Some happen with warm hugs, others with closed eyes and open hearts. And if today I can smile again, laugh again, be moved by the simple beauty of a sunset or the song of a cardinal, it's because I learned from my grandmother that life isn't about avoiding pain. It's about finding meaning in it, about transforming it into fuel for more love, about transforming each absence into renewed presence, about transforming each silence into intimate conversation, about transforming each tear into a bridge for those who stayed and those who departed. And now I pass this on to you who might be living your own grieving in process, who might need to believe that there's something beyond this life we can touch with our hands. Believe, because love continues, it always continues, and if one day by chance you smell the impossible scent of apple cinnamon bread floating in the air of your house, even without having cooked anything, it might be her, or yours, or someone you love immensely, someone who never really went away, someone who just changed addresses, but kept the same phone number of the heart.